Hello and welcome, everybody. It is Coach Action Jackson, and I'm here with another episode of Client Success Stories. I'm joined by a superstar. His name is Jeremy. Jeremy is a classic good to great story. He was knocking on the window of great and he wanted to get in, and he ran right through the door. He lost around 11 pounds. He lost 3% body fat, getting down to 15.8. He lost 6 total pounds of fat off of his body, and he managed to gain almost 3/4 of a pound of muscle while in a cut phase, which is pretty incredible for somebody who's advanced as he is, but also, again, during that cut phase. So, Jeremy, you did an incredible job. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Jackson. So, hey, everyone, my name's Jeremy, 41 years old, marketing director. Super excited about the results that I got with this program, and I cannot thank Jackson enough.
Now, Jeremy, when you started, you're kind of like, again, a good to great story. So you didn't start where a lot of people do, where, they're, fairly out of shape or they've fallen off. They want to get things back. Like, you started at a pretty good spot. And again, it's classic good to great. So given kind of where you were at before the program, I guess, why was there this drive, this ambition, motivation, whatever you want to call it, to try to get to the next level?
Sure. So prior to this program, I was doing a lot of nutrition work. So I was cutting macros before for probably year and a half, 2 years. I was really focused on nutrition. But what I found was the link between nutrition and working out wasn't there. So the motivation even sometimes for working out wasn't there. And if I'm eating 3,000 calories a day, like, you need to have the motivation to work out at the same time and kind of pull it through. Otherwise it's kind of for nothing. So I really needed something to kind of kick me into gear to some extent to try to capitalize on the nutrition progress that I had made.
Yeah, you were definitely doing a lot of work on nutrition, and I gotta say, you're you're incredible because you're the probably the first person I've ever worked with where we did a cut, and your cut was like more calories than me and almost anybody else eats during like a bulking phase. I mean, you were at 2,600 calories during your cut. You were also eating like 200 grams of protein or so, like 200 plus grams of carbohydrates. So for everybody out there who thinks you need to go super low calorie and you need to cut your carbs to zero in order to get a six pack or lose body fat, I mean, you're a classic case that's not true.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I was a little nervous going in of how my food would drop because I was so used to eating honestly so much, like an aggressive amount of food. And honestly, even after 6 weeks and now even into like 20 weeks or so, still kind of losing weight, which is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So we reduced the calories, obviously, from where you're at. We used the classic reverse diet to make sure that your metabolism didn't sink down too far. And sometimes, again, especially for somebody like yourself who's advanced, who really pushes it with the weights and their training, you could end up seeing their body fat continue to reduce. Even as you think you kind of get to a higher number of calories, which is pretty incredible and also fantastic. So, just take me back to the place again when we first started. So you were kind of like, again, you had done a lot of work with nutrition. You felt like maybe you didn't have all the puzzle pieces together. Was there a moment? Was there like, just a trigger or something that was like, hey, I have to do something to fix this?
I think like right before I started, probably late last year, motivation was waning and I was feeling a little directionless. And I'll be honest, like, I put on muscle fairly easily to some extent. And I mean, I've only been working out for about 10 years or so, which I guess only is a pretty significant amount of time. But I went from absolutely nothing before I started that. And I felt like I was kind of like wandering on a journey without a destination to some extent. And that makes it really hard to not eat what I want to and not do what I want to, because I didn't really have an end target. And what I wanted to get from this program is some kind of direction or kind of infuse this into my well being so I can continue on this path long term and to not just drop off and feel like I don't want to do this anymore and kind of carry on. So, what I really wanted was the direction and I really felt like I needed somebody to help me through that process.
100%. I totally understand that because as we're going, right, this fitness journey, this health and fitness journey, it's kind of a never ending journey. It's not just a marathon, it's the never ending marathon. So you have to constantly find things to keep you driven, keep you going, keep you moving. And by constantly having new goals or new things that you want to achieve or accomplish, that keeps you engaged, keeps you motivated, keeps the drive and the hunger alive, so that you continue. Because otherwise, it's very easy. And a lot of people, they reach their weight loss goal or they hit a certain body fat level, they get the abs, whatever it is, and then they fall off completely because they don't set a new path or a new direction, where they don't have any accountability or support group, and then it gets boring and then they fall off. So I definitely commend you for recognizing that, having the awareness, and then reaching out. What was it about, whether it was a piece of content I posted, like what was it about me specifically that drew you to me and want to work with me?
I mean, I've had a tonal for about 2 or so years, or 2.5 years before joining this program, and obviously I did all your programs. They were some of my favorite programs, and I think your style and your love, your motivation, it was not too much, not too little. That it kind of jived with what I wanted to do, and it seemed like it would be a good fit.
Fantastic. Now, a little plug for Tonal here. You're a classic case because you're a big athletic guy. You're strong. You've been training for 10 years, pretty hard, as you mentioned. You've done a lot of work. So you're a classic case of like, hey, even somebody like yourself who's big and strong, you can use Tonal and still get great results. I mean, obviously that's the case with you. Have you found there to be limitations, or what's your perspective on Tonal and strength training with it specifically versus maybe other methods like the gym?
Sure. So I got my tonal during the COVID pandemic. It was mid 2020. We got it. I haven't been to a gym since. Like I haven't touched a barbell. I haven't touched anything outside of my tonal. I love it. The ability to work out at home, like while during the course of my workday, if I'm home that day, is amazing. And it allows me to get workouts in that I otherwise would have never driven to the gym to do. I've never felt limited by the weight limits. I've never felt limited by anything. I don't really miss anything, to be perfectly honest. I feel like I can do everything I need to do here in my house, and I'm seeing the results, so I don't see any reason to change anything.
That's absolutely fantastic. I love to hear that. And it's true. I mean, so many guys think, oh, 200-pound limit. Oh, man, I'm going to be at that in no second. But the magnetic weights, they feel different. They are heavier than the normal weights at the gym. And for most things, the risk of injury starts escalating very quickly, especially as I'm 40, you're 41. As you get into your 40s, trying to go for PRs like on all the time on deadlift and other stuff. It's like, no, I'm okay there. I think I'm just gonna, do my workouts. I'm gonna push myself, of course, but I don't need to hit a 1 rep max here to try to get results, because more often than not, that's not really going to help you, whether it's for fat loss or hypertrophy or whatever your particular, um, you know, flavor of training is, or result that you want to get. So, okay, so obviously you're in fantastic shape. You realigned your goals. I guess, what's the next direction for you? Because now that you lean down, you got the body fat a lot lower, you got the abs coming through, you've got a really good foundation. Like, I guess, what's the next goal or the next thing to keep you engaged, and how do you manage that after going through this program? Were there any breakthroughs or other things that you've kind of like insights that you've had to keep you motivated for the long term?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing I got from this program is the routine of everything. I think nutrition was a routine to me already, but I didn't have the ability to pivot or know if I was to do something out of my normal nutrition program, like what would happen to me, right? And like how quickly I would recover. I think now after 4 months, I know the ins and outs of what a cheat meal is, how to prepare for a cheat meal, and what the recovery process will be in my weight after that. I mean, tracking everything every day, it really gets me that kind of better understanding of how my body works. So, from a nutrition perspective, I've improved even more significantly than I thought I would. And I think from a direction perspective, in a weight loss, in a routine of fitness, it's a part of me now. I think like I wasn't working out necessarily 4 or 5 days a week. Now I am, and I'm still like before the 16 weeks are done, I'm still working out the same exact days I was before, the same off days, and the days to lift, and it it's a part of me now, and it's weird to say that and feel that way, but I think this helped me kind of become the person I wanted to be to some extent, and to make myself feel like I'm not being somebody else while doing this. Does that make sense?
I love that. That's fantastic. One of the things, that I told you when we first had our first conversation was that this is education is a very large part of what we do. We don't want to just tell you what to do. We want to tell you why. We want to give you the insight. We want to help you think for yourself because ultimately that's going to be the key to long-term success is taking agency and ownership over your health and fitness. So education, really learning, understanding things so that you can manage this on your own and you graduate from the program. The program just doesn't end. You graduate and it really becomes part of who you are. So I love that that's the case with you. And that's one of the things I say is that once it becomes part of you, part of your identity, it all becomes kind of easier to do. It's just like part of your habit, your lifestyle, who you are. And you couldn't imagine living any other way. So when you say it helps you become the kind of person that you want to be, what is that person? Like, I guess what give me the compare the contrast from kind of where you were to the person you are now and what does that kind of look like?
Before I started this program, I was, like I said before, I was a little bit directionless. And in the back of my head, I would sometimes wonder, why am I bothering to do this? I didn't feel like I necessarily needed to lose any weight. I didn't feel like I necessarily needed to put on muscle much of an extent. I was happy with how I looked and how I felt, but I didn't quite know why I was doing what I was doing. And I think now following this program, it's not a matter of why am I doing what I'm doing. It's just kind of who I am. I eat healthy, I work out, and it's if I didn't do that, it would be out of the ordinary. And it was a bit of a mental shift for me to. It sounds small, but it was a shift for me in my brain that I think makes the post program life a lot easier.
Oh my God, I love that, Jeremy. One of my nutrition mentors, his name's Lane Norton. I've done his certification classes and stuff, and fantastic nutrition advice that I've learned from him. And he's been talking about this actor named Ethan Souffle, I believe his name is, and he's lost like 200 pounds. He was the guy on Boy Meets World, the big bully guy. He was a really very large guy, and he's lost 200 pounds, and he's like completely different. And he posts on his Instagram, and he always says like, "I killed the old version of me." And in the program, I talk about the two versions of myself. I talk about little John, which is like the scared, shy kind of kid who sits in the back of the classroom, doesn't say anything to anybody. And then there's like Action Jackson, who's like Taylor and Swift, and let's work out. And action is the difference. Like those are the two different versions of me. And every day I wake up, I'm trying to kill this other version of me, right? And I feel myself sometimes shift right in between them. And like I feel little John come on, and I'm like, no, go away, little John. Action Jackson's here to stay. I mean, so I love that metaphor of like these two different versions of me. And I love how you're saying this is just part of who I am now. Because again, once you shift to being part of your lifestyle, everything becomes easy. And when you're first getting started, sometimes that could seem like a little bit impossible to imagine. Oh, I can't imagine that. But again, it's like brushing your teeth. You don't have to be motivated to brush your teeth. You don't have to get hyped up and psyched up. You just do it. And it's the same thing. Once you just get to the point where you just eat healthy, you just work out, you just do these things because it's who you are. You enjoy it and you love, to quote the great Harvey Specter, you like living life up here. It's just a whole world opens up and it's fantastic. So I'm really excited for you and this sort of breakthrough that you had. Were there any other sort of breakthroughs, insights, mental, physical, or otherwise that you had during the program?
I think as I was a little bit of an atypical person in the program, I would say, and that was challenging at times because I had to reconcile what my goals were versus what other people's goals were and how they look a little bit different. And in the end, to me, this ended up being about incremental change that on the surface, incremental change, but it was actually bigger mind shifts versus kind of big physical changes. And that was hard for me to reconcile with at the beginning. And you probably know that by the multiple conversations we had about it. But I think it clicked at some point and things just got a lot easier.
Absolutely. You're for sure right. Most people start in a much lower position than you. So, average client that goes through our program, and this is averages, loses around 18 pounds, 4% body fat, gains around 1.5 pounds of muscle. But for you to do that, I mean, you'd be like pro bodybuilder status at that point because like those are massive changes. And you didn't start where most people start. You started at a higher level. So again, using the Mount Everest analogy, most people are starting at the base, or they're not even in base camp. You're kind of like on base camp 2 or 3 already. So you started much further up the mountain. And then as you get to closer and closer to the summit, those incremental improvements, each step takes a lot longer. I love watching these mountaineering documentaries, and when you watch them, and people get near the summit of any of these, like, really tall peaks, whether it's Annapurna or K2 or Mount Everest, and once they get close, every step is like one step, and then they take a couple breaths and they take another step, and it's so incremental, and the improvement and the shift is just, it's a little bit slower, it's more incremental because they're near the summit. And for you, you were a lot closer to the summit, so yes, the changes are incremental, but they are still absolutely significant, not only in terms of the visual progress and the photos look amazing, but also, of course, the actual numbers that we have here, the quantitative improvements. So, really fantastic stuff, my friend. You did a fantastic job. I'm super proud of you. One other thing I definitely want to bring up is, as we kind of went through this program, you mentioned to me at one point, you said something like, you always have like a book recommendation and like something to say. I'm just kind of curious, like, what was your interaction, I guess, with me like, and the conversations that we had, and how was that helpful, beneficial, whether it was the books I recommended or things or advice I've given you, just to kind of get an insight of like how the coaching on top of the program was helpful.
Sure. No, I tended, as I think, as everyone knows, our brains go in many different directions. Sometimes we have good days, sometimes we have bad days. I tended to reach out to you for calls or just overall support over text on the bad days, and because that's when I needed some level of motivation to get to the next level or to reach the next breakthrough, right? And every single time I reached out to you, I don't know how. I mean, you've been doing this a while, so that's probably how. But you knew exactly where I was in like my mental journey. You knew exactly what to say to get me over whatever that hump was. And then, like you said, you always had 3 to 4 book recommendations as to like how I could further get past whatever this block was. So it was super helpful to me to know that you knew exactly where I was coming from. You always made me feel like whatever issue I had was a real issue. It was not just something manufactured in my head or silly or it was always super motivating whenever we spoke, because it really always got me to the next place, because like I said, I always reached out on like kind of the lower points that we all have.
Absolutely. Tony Robbins, whether you love him or hate him, he says that success is 80% psychological and 20% mechanics. And while the program, right, the diet, the workouts, all of that stuff, it matters and it's important. It does make a big difference. But the psychology, as you kind of just touched on, is so important because our minds go in a million different directions, and staying right on the path, staying moving forward, overcoming obstacles mentally is often the biggest hang up for people. It's the big saboteur of success. Like, it sabotages people over and over and over again. It's something I've struggled with over the years, and it's something everybody has to deal with as they go through, whether it's a weight loss journey or a fitness thing or they're building a business or anything else. So, what advice or tips or tricks would you have for people out there? Because I gave you, obviously, whatever assistance, advice, help I could give you. But here's the thing, Jeremy, you did two major things that not everybody always does that I have to commend you on. One, you reached out for help when you needed it. Not many people are willing or able to do that, whether it's because they don't have the self-awareness, or there's some sort of shame or guilt around asking for help. And then two, you actually executed. You did the stuff, right? So those are two big things that I don't want to overlook. How did you manage to do that?
I mean, I'm not normally the person that will go ask for help, and I think that's a life thing about me. But I mean, but realistically, I invested a lot in this program, and I only had 16 weeks to have you as my support system, right? So I tried to leverage that when I needed it as much as possible, because I need to do this. I need to live my life on my own, right? And I wanted to be able to get as much as I can out of these 16 weeks as I could, and so it became essential, right? Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point of having someone like you with all of your knowledge and expertise if I didn't tap into that when I needed it and how I needed it?
Oh, that's so fantastic. So I love it because I like to think of the Google Maps or the Apple Maps analogy, right? If you want to go on a journey somewhere, right? It's very high level, but this is the macro approach. You identify your starting location, you get a very specific destination in mind, right? So we have these two specific things, the starting location and destination. We create the roadmap, and then we have a time frame for getting there in the most direct, fastest way possible. That gives us urgency. It sets expectations, of course, but it allows us also to move in the right direction. And that's kind of what you did, what you're kind of saying there. And it's the urgency, it's the kick in the butt, it's the time frame that really drives us sometimes to do things when we don't want to. Because the reality is, and people say this all the time, they always say I'm not motivated to do it. It's not motivation, because you're not going to feel motivated on like every single day of the week. You don't wake up, I'm so motivated to eat healthy and track my macros and to work out today. It just doesn't work like that. It has to just become a habit, obviously, but you have to have drive. You have to have some kick in the butt, usually to push you over the hump and get you to do the things that we often don't want, but we know that we need to do. To quote one of my favorite speakers of all time, Les Brown, he says, if you do what is easy, your life will be hard. But if you do what is hard, your life will be easy. And I love that. So, well, any last thoughts or anything that you want to share with people out there, Jeremy, as we wrap up here? Because I want to be respectful of your time.
I just want to thank you. I think what I wanted to some extent was a level of accountability, and you gave me that level of accountability. And I've told you this before that in my mind, you were checking the app and checking it up on me every single day, even though you probably realistically weren't. But that's what I needed to do to kind of do what I needed to do. With that, it built habits, and with the habits built, I think is long term success, right? So thank you for that, because you gave me exactly what I needed from this program and more. And it's not just about the way you look or the way you feel. I think the mental shift was not something I expected, but something that I'm really thankful for.
That is an amazing insight, because I hear this all the time. When people start the program, they think, just give me the diet, give me the workouts, I'll be good. But it's the mindset aspect that most people on these calls always say is one of the biggest breakthroughs, if not the biggest breakthrough. And mindset for me has been so huge over the years of trying to, consistently build my business and kind of move up and kind of, help more people and such. So fantastic breakthrough. I love it. I want to now make sure that I honor and respect you by saying thank you so much for putting in the hard work, for trusting me, for investing in yourself, and for joining this program. And you put in so much energy and effort, and I appreciate it really in my core and in my heart, because especially working with somebody like you at a higher level, it's just so fun. And I love seeing the changes, and I love seeing the breakthroughs physically and especially mentally that you had over the course of the journey. But I want you to remember one really important thing is that you were the one that moved the weight. You were the one that tracked the macros. You were the one that put all the effort and the energy in, and you earned all of the success and the rewards and stuff that comes from it, and all the confidence that you built, of course, by doing it as well. So when you go back into that cookie jar, I want you to think and remember about all the work that you put in and the days that you didn't want to do it, but you did it anyway. You did that. And that's a really important point to remember. So thank you, Jeremy, for doing that. I appreciate you. Your journey matters much more than you think. You're inspiring people right here today. You inspired people in our group, of course, and you inspire me. So thank you.
Thank you.